Programmatic. Programmatic.
Hey,
Yeah, buddy. Postpod.
it is the post pod.
It is a postpod.
Here we go, V.
Here we go. Welcome back.
So
September.
welcome back. Here we go. Yeah, and we're in September. This is
We're
fantastic.
rejuvenated,
Excited,
excited,
enthusiastic,
all of it.
all those things. It's amazing.
It's great.
That was a cool conversation. I mean, to be totally fair, you're way more advanced on the programmatic side than I am. I would say like a very peripheral couple of use cases of running programmatic, not the extent
Right.
of like that you've had of trying to bring it in house. So maybe like kind of just take me through like an overview of what you thought of the conversation and some of the highlights you had.
You know, I'm honest. Like, I wish we had more time with them because, you know, for me, the programmatic space has evolved so much. I know we kept using a reference like the last 10 years, but really it's even in the last 5 years where we've seen leaps and bounds of new ways of targeting audiences. You know, obviously like the big push where, you know, your people are opting out of their ads on their iPhones, the privacy regulations has really shifted and forced these platforms to find better, more efficient ways of targeting at the end of the day. And I think what's interesting, and they highlighted this in their conversation, is we as a user group, and not as an advertiser, but as consumers, we dictate the evolution of the platforms. And I think what's interesting now, it's because it's become so, I guess, top of mind for a lot of consumers, like, hey, how am I being tracked? Am I opting into sharing my cookies? Am I not opting into the sharing the cookies? It's forcing the Googles of the world to really rethink what their strategies on the underlying tech that provides then advertisers that closer ability to find that personalization journey. Because let's not forget, when surveyed, and we can either people will say one thing but do another. When surveyed, people always say that they want more personalized ads. And that's where it's almost like, okay, how are we going to continue to navigate the space? And the nuance, because we live in Canada, there is some element of it that we just don't have the full breadth available to us yet, like say in the United States or even in Europe, but they're even more governed in Europe than we are here. So I really enjoyed the conversation, and we probably could have taken it in a lot of different directions as well. But I love the 4 buckets that, you know, Jeremy highlighted around the prospecting, contextual. I love the whole notion that we've come full circle on contextual. Audience targeting in the private marketplaces is a good way to kind of think about like those are the opportunities you have when you leverage.
Yeah, the contextual part was interesting because, and you probably have been in this situation before. Somebody in an executive position goes, well, I just want to buy like that spot on Vanity Fair's website because it's like they think about it like advertising in a magazine. And then fast forward and then to say 10 years ago, it was no, we can reach people wherever they are. And then it doesn't have to be on a particular magazine website from Vanity Fair's magazine. It could be like vanityfair.com. It could be any website, and people are multitudes. They don't just consume like I like Y&R. I already did when I was 18 or whatever, 17. So I might have visited that website at the time, Vanity Fair. I'm really painting a picture for myself, Vanity Fair. But then I might have also been like Powder Magazine and like Fantasy Football. You know what I mean? Like I'm all those people.
This guy's all over the place.
Yes, totally. But I think most people are like that. There's very few people that only consume one form of content, and so then you're looking for contextual targeting. I think that it's kind of come full circle where now you can go back to that and select only the placements that it really matters to you.
Yeah, I agree with you. The contextual side is really interesting, and I think it's, again, and I love that it has become. I kind of like the fact that it's come full circle, if I'm being honest, because I think you and I can also, attest, like, how much personalization is too much? How far do you have to go? Do you really need to go to find like that one-to-one message with the consumer, or is it just like looking at those broader audiences where you kind of target, like, and that's where contextual works great, because it's like almost like the broadest audience you can find. So it's like, they use basketball as an example. I think it's a great one, but we have a shoe. We want to target people that want basketball information. That's very simple. It's these sports sites, it's these, retailers or whatever. And it's your largest possible audience. That's okay. There's a lot you can do even with that in of itself. So,
Totally.
and I think more than anything, just challenging and thinking about, like, how do you perceive your audience through these digital platforms? Now, the one thing I did want to touch on is a little bit, and it's actually really, really resonated with me right now. I never, prior to this conversation, I never thought of YouTube as CTV. And that's a mistake on my half, because I probably consume more YouTube through my television than I do on my phone or my computer. And the targeting opportunities that exist on YouTube are insane.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, you layer in search keywords into your YouTube targeting. I remember, funny, I don't remember. A long time ago, I was running a brand campaign. I'm trying to remember where it was, but anyway, it was a brand campaign, and we had YouTube ads. It was probably when we were working together at Sport Check. And it was the first time I remember seeing TV show up as a placement, and it was like, at the time, like, I think it was when we were at Sport Check. Anyway, it was like in January I ran the campaign, and it was 3%. It showed up as a new metric, 3% placements on TV. I didn't target it because I didn't even know it existed. Fast forward to the spring, and there was another video of same kind of concept that we were trying to get out there. And I didn't target it because, I couldn't select that. And it was suddenly like 15% of the consumption came from a TV screen. I was like, that's cool. Like, either the demand of
Crazy
went up that much over a period of time, and this is like 6 years ago, before all these smart TVs really made a dent. It was fascinating to me. I remember thinking it was super interesting. And then when I was working at an agency later on, we would select TV placements exclusively from YouTube, because we could get sound on environments, and most often people would consume video longer on a TV set than they would on a mobile device. So you're getting extra attention, extra reach, extra impressions for the brand, and all that kind of stuff. And so it was really fascinating. So I kind of only accidentally thought of YouTube as like a connected thing, only because I just happened to see this weird metric show up at one point. But even now, there's so much more inventory than there ever was before, because you've got all these new channels. And I don't know where Netflix ad platform, maybe that's not through programmatic, but that's a thing. Hulu's a thing. Roku's a thing. Like, so many of these platforms now have connected TV. It's fascinating.
You brought up a great example when you used, I don't remember what Shaw calls it, but I use Apple TV, and sometimes it'll just show me, hey, there's the game on, or sorry, like the Flames are down 2 goals to whatever, to Edmonton, or up, or whatever. And you can just quickly switch to the game. Now, it's not Apple that's giving you the feed. It's connected to my TV provider that I've hooked up in the back end, and it's bringing the game up. Or, for example, if I'm searching for a movie, and it's like, well, the movie's on Prime, or it's over here on the Apple platform, and then you can pick and choose where you go. And I think when you said that, and it's like, it doesn't matter where the source is coming from anymore. All that matters is that you're getting to the content. So when we're thinking about now in the context of ads, where you're consuming that ad, you may not, like you said, you didn't even know it was on YouTube when you were watching the show, or a clip, but all of a sudden an ad pops up, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting to kind of perceive TV as TV, and not really through the lens of what is traditional, what is connected, and whatnot. It's like, no, this is the screen. So if someone's
Mm-hmm.
watching it on YouTube, this is what it looks like. If someone's watching it on their mobile phone, this is what it looks like. But people are also consuming, say, Rogers Sportsnet on their phones too.
Yeah.
So it's like you're almost
Yeah,
playing to
totally.
the screens versus the platforms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good point. And I thought, the comment, I think it was Ben that mentioned it about like making it easier for buyers to buy. Like there
Yeah.
are so many places to put an ad. It would be almost impossible. Like if you rewind to the beginning of my career, like literally there was TV, radio, a little tiny bit of
Yeah.
website, and then print
Yeah.
and out of home. Like, but they weren't. That was it. Like you pretty much had 4 places you could put an ad up. Now there's hundreds of, maybe
Totally.
thousands of places you could put an ad up. And so there's this also challenge in terms of like a fracturing of the share of market from a media perspective, like of
Yeah.
broadcasters. Like you have many more places to put my attention, and
Mm-hmm.
broadcasters go, like even our podcast as an example.
Oh my goodness.
Um, so like finding the places and buying that is becoming so much more challenging. And so I think programmatic solves a buyer's need and a
Totally.
brand's need to get in front of a lot of people at once in sophisticated ways that are helpful.
Yeah. No, I'm with you, and I think if we kind of like go full circle here in the sense like I'm excited about the programmatic space specifically, and where it's headed. More so because, if I use it through the lens of an advertiser, I'm
Mm-hmm.
extremely excited because I think the tools are going to continuously evolve. It's going to help us, drive more efficiency with our media spend, maximize our
Mm-hmm.
media facing dollars, or you're able then to really maybe quantify something's working or it's not working.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm excited about all those aspects because I think it just gives us more access and more tools to
Mm-hmm.
continuously try to be better at what we do or a product that we sell or service that we sell. And when I think about it in a consumer perspective, there is a point where I want to make sure that the information that I provide, and I think there's going to be a shift where will be very linear in what information is accessible, say, to advertisers.
Yeah.
And when that happens, then I will probably be even more forthcoming to specific ads because I know what to expect. I still
Mm-hmm.
believe, like from a consumer perspective, like right now, I don't know, like on Instagram as an example, I'm getting targeted by this ad probably like 8 times a day. And even though I'm saying, hey, I don't want to see this anymore because the frequency is too high, it's turned into annoyance for me.
Mm-hmm.
And
Sure.
just imagine that at scale, especially when you
Yeah.
were doing these larger campaigns. So that's where I think, frequency capping models, the
Mm-hmm.
ability to target more nuanced audiences, that's where it becomes important. And that's where programmatic can kind of help and drive the volume to all the channels through one consolidated platform.
Let me ask you this, because you were involved in trying to bring programmatic in-house, or
Yeah.
did. And
Yeah.
so we talked about a little bit about risk to the brand, either placements or fraud or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
How big of an obstacle was that, or big of a concern was that for the executive teams that you were working with? And then
It's huge.
what kinds of things did you try to put in place to mitigate for that?
Yeah, no, that was huge. And it's a great question, Mark. It was huge because the
Thanks,
last
Pete.
thing man, have you done this before? It's, no, it's definitely top of mind. Especially even our shared experience at SportCheck, where we kind of started venturing down that path. Executives wanted to know that, they were safeguarded and that we wouldn't be showing up in websites that were, controversial in any way, shape, or form. And I think at the time, and that's how, in full transparency here to our audience, it's how I met Ben. We worked hand in hand at the time with Google, just to kind of bring to life what a I guess an internalized solution could look like for at the time at SportCheck. And they had, this is a few years ago, and I'm sure like it's evolved even more since then. But they had essentially algorithms and that would kind of run to find a lot of these websites that were again, I'm just going to use the word controversial, that would
Sure.
automatically put them in this bucket that didn't make that inventory accessible to the platforms. And I think for me, because again, that was one of my first ventures into that space. Then subsequently, when I did it a second time, it I remember at the time it was how did not only we would provide, kind of direction in terms of like what sites were off site, off out of
Off
bounds,
brand or yeah.
exactly, because sometimes it's like the brands change, so the product that you're featuring, but then it's working through an SI as well to kind of really identify that and showcase that, what, it's safeguarded. Here's a pool, and they would send a report. I remember it was it every second month, I think. It's like new sites were added to this blackout list. So that was like the transparency that you wanted to know that, hey, this is top of mind for them. They're making sure that, your inventory is not going places where it could be conspicuous or, put you in a bad light. Because it is hard. Because Ben talked about the set it and forget it. I know a lot of digital marketers that will go in, here's the ad, here's the creative, here's my targeting, this is what I want, this much money I'm putting in, run it, and just walk away. While that works, it can work, you do have to be diligent on your own as well and make sure you're asking for those reports. Where did these impressions come to life? And even if you're spot checking it as well, saying, okay, let's just take some of these URLs. Do they check out? Do they not check out?
Yeah.
There's still a lot of fraud out there, and that's still a reality, though.
Did you ever have to deal with like bot fraud, like as far as, or is that the bad websites that you're talking about?
So I didn't have to deal with bot fraud. There was an instance of it, but it was like a third-party vendor. I don't care to talk about them publicly, but we realized that the impressions that they were showcasing to us were coming from bots. And I never personally had a problem ever running through, Google's platforms for that matter. And I think that's, again, where it's like you got to also have to be careful on who you're partnering with. You want to work with those that probably have the most experience in the space more than anything.
Yeah, and arguably Google does.
I would think they would.
Yeah, they're up there. They've served a few ads.
A few. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, the other one that I thought was really interesting, I think it was Jared talking about originally the measurement and attribution, and just in terms of like having a conversation with the executive team and talking about what success looks like up front before even like day one turning the power on a computer. I thought that was really interesting, and then figuring out what the metrics are that you're going to use to evaluate success by. And then later on, when we were talking to Ben about this experimentation, how often that should link back to one another. Like the experiment shouldn't be an experiment for the experiment's sake. It should be, how are we improving the outcomes that we said that we were going to measure against? And so, yeah, I thought that was really cool just to see. I mean, it's not radical in any way. It's just very logical, but it's good to hear that perspective, I thought.
I agree with you. If we just touch on the experimentation side, I think Ben said something to the effect of the budget can be anything that you need it to be, as long as it's answering the question that you had, right? Yeah. And I think how much do you value, say, that problem statement that you've set out for that test? That should be how you determine, I guess, your budget. So I never thought about it like that. Obviously, for me, it's always been something, hey, we're going to set aside 10% of our budget and we're going to just test. But maybe we're doing a lift study and it requires a larger investment. We should be able to invest that because that's going to inform future business decisions. So I think there's an important distinction there. And then coming back to your point on measurement, my goodness, it's still, I think, today, the biggest challenge that organizations have is alignment on how to effectively measure their marketing spend or how they're driving value. I think it was in a conversation we just had, I think in the previous podcast, just around like, how do you think about brand in the context of of marketing. It's like generating future cash flow. When you
Mhm.
put it in that lens, it's less about brand building to the business. It's more about reassuring, like, this is what we're driving. So if you take that as an example, then start thinking about, okay, what is going to be that attribution model or our measurement framework to help drive that. That's a conversation you need to have with your executives and set an alignment. It's like, hey, here we're using last click attribution because it's Black Friday, Cyber Monday, but for everything else, we're doing this.
Yeah.
And that's how we're going to help
Yeah.
answer that question for you, driving that future cash flow, or
Yeah.
insert thing here.
Yeah. Totally. The other one, I think, I'm pretty sure it was Jeremy that said this, but just under identifying what the holes are. Like,
Yeah.
where do you have a blind spot in your metric?
Yeah.
And so being aware of that, I think, is a
Totally.
really great idea, because you believe that you can measure all kinds of things, but you might not take as much time to be aware of the things that you can't measure, or the limitations of your measurement.
Agree.
And so I think that was really important too. Like, even things like, I know we talked about it today, but ROAS, and we've had conversations about ROAS before, but like, it sounds obvious, but like, what does ROAS actually mean? And you know what I mean? And like, from a perspective of what are our holes, like, what is it not measuring and what is it measuring? And so I think that, like, the definition and clearly outlining where there's blind spots in a single metric like that, even though if you have a metric, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have a great view of what it means.
Totally.
Yeah.
It was a nice departure, I guess, from a conversations that we usually have, and it got a little bit more tactical, if you will. But I think I'm just naturally just very, very interested in this space because it's changing so much, and selfishly, I just want to continue to learn and pressure test it.
No, but I mean, it's a great conversation to have for a whole bunch of reasons. But I mean, if you take strategy as a framework and use Roger Martin's like 5 steps, right? Like, this fits solely into like your core capabilities and management systems, right? Like, what kind of tools are you using to support your company's objectives? And so you can go down a path of, and to your point, like, maybe talk about owning contracts, because I wanted to ask you about that and I didn't want to interrupt the conversation. But even as a starting point of when you said to own a contract, it doesn't mean you have to bring in